speaker has been such an important voice of reason in the industry over the years and has become a regular speaker here at Cloud Connect. He's an award-winning analyst, and he is here today to tell you that despite everything that we've been hearing about here at the conference this week, don't even think about moving your applications to the cloud. I'm going to let James explain that, but please join me in welcoming James Staten, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester.
Okay, so you heard Chris talk about how enterprises have no chance of doing private cloud, so don't bother. You just heard Newstar say that if you're going to use the cloud, it's extremely complicated. You have to have complicated algorithms. There's no chance you're going to succeed in this. And you heard Google say that if you don't know 15th century history, you just don't get it. So you excited about the cloud? The reality that they are all presenting is really, really important, because one thing we have to constantly keep in mind is cloud infrastructures, they are not your traditional inside infrastructure. And as a result, you really have to think about what you're going to put there and whether it's actually going to fit or not. And that's why I titled my presentation what I did, because I really need to hammer home to enterprises all across the country here that you just cannot pick up the application running in your data center, drop it on a cloud, and assume it'll work. It's a really bad assumption, because enterprise applications just are not designed to work in environments like this. And if you don't get that through your head, and you don't pull it up the chain of command, and you don't push it down the chain of command in your organization, somebody's expectations are going to be out of alignment, and they're gonna be dissatisfied with a cloud experience. And that's very much what we've seen. So if you remember, I made some predictions at the end of last year, end of 2010, where I said that lots of enterprises were going to invest in private clouds this year, and the majority of them would fail. They don't fail because the technology isn't there. They fail because of this expectation mismatch. And that is really, really critical to understand. So if there's nothing else you take away from my presentation, take that away. Now, with that said, let's look a little deeper at this issue and then how to solve it. So one thing you have to understand, and you've already heard this from Chris earlier today, and you definitely should have noticed that through the other presentations that you've seen thus far, is that when you look at the enterprise infrastructure and you compare that to a cloud infrastructure, these are not the same thing by any means. They're extremely different in structure. One of the things that we take for granted in IT, and those of us that build and develop applications and put them into our corporate data centers, we assume that the IT organization and the data center take care of high availability and reliability. The cloud, we assume, will do the same thing, but they don't. They do not do high availability at the same level, nor do they do high availability for you. It's your responsibility to take that on. And this is what Forrester has said for a long time we call the uneven handshake, which is where you have to say, what is the service doing for me? What are they providing in the infrastructure? Where do they stop? And what do I have responsibility for from that point where they stop up? So all cloud services are abstractions. They abstract away from the point of the service down. So we know in infrastructure as a service, you get the virtual machine, you don't get to see the server, you don't get to see how the server is configured, you don't get to change all that. So when they give you a virtual machine, you sort of have to go on trust that they're going to make that virtual machine available. But to what degree? You have to think about that and understand that, and then you have to put the right operating system instance on top. You have to put a cluster on top of that if necessary. You have to put performance monitoring on top of that if necessary. You have to put the right middleware in place, and you've got to monitor the whole thing and make sure it's highly available. So if you're an infrastructure and operations professional, is your job all that different? You just don't have to run into the data center periodically anymore. So if we're going to take our legacy applications and we're going to put them into the cloud, how do we actually do that? Well, first of all, that's a really bad question to ask. The second thing is you have to say, well, what does it actually mean to cloud enable the legacy? Because that's really more important, and that's why I chose this image here. Those of you that are fans of the Back to the Future chain of movies will recognize this. Came from the third of those films. You don't actually pick up your legacy and drop it in the cloud. You transform it. And the way you transform it is that you put links to your legacy that create a bridge between what the legacy did and what it's capable of doing and what the cloud is able to do for it. That means you want to concentrate on, why would I move something at all? Am I moving it just because I want cost savings? The cloud sure seems cheap. Is that a legitimate reason? Not really. It's actually cheaper not to move it at all. Like, let's use a different analogy and you'll see where the connection comes through. Quick pop quiz for you. What is the most green car that you could possibly possess right now? The one you already own. Because no new manufacturing takes place, no new natural resources get damaged to create that, and so it is automatically greener than any new car that you could buy or that you could build. From a legacy perspective, from a total cost of ownership, the thing that's sitting in the corner, if I don't do anything to that, it's actually a lower TCO, because I already know how to run it. I've already taken all the steps necessary to try to make it efficient. So if I'm going to move it somewhere else, it can't be for cost reasons. I've got to be moving it because there's some other value. Is it no longer achieving the agility or the productivity that we need? Does it no longer fit in the business processes that we're doing in our organization? Can it not reach out to my customers who are now coming in from different interfaces? If it has no ability to give a user interface to a mobile device, that might be a reason to transform. And transform is the key. So you're not going to suddenly go to SAP, for example, and say, hey, you know that SAP ERP instance that I've been running since 1985, I'd really like you guys to give me, make that thing do mobile. Is that okay? Can you do that for me? And by the way, I don't plan on upgrading. That ain't going to happen. So the way you do this is actually the way you've been doing transformation of legacy applications for a long time. In fact, during the dot-com period, we actually learned how to do this. We just have to sort of take our brains back a little bit, and we'll see exactly where that was. So what I mean by this is you take your legacy applications, and legacy doesn't have to be mainframe. It could be, frankly, anything. It could even be running in Windows and maybe even virtualized in your VMware environment. But you take these applications that are already done, and you don't really want to mess with that code, and you start to wrap them in what we call concentric circles. You surround that legacy application with new capabilities that run independently and can call back to the legacy system through the conduits that the legacy system already exposes. If you remember back in the early days of the web, we took applications that could do nothing but a green screen, and we figured out how to take green screen streams and turn them into HTML so you could see them in the browser. And we did this not by modifying the legacy, but by putting things in front of it. That's the concentric circle model. And so the way it works here is take your legacy application, all those interfaces it have, and surround it with a web infrastructure, something that can actually use this information, manipulate this information, do it in a load-balanced, spread-out, distributed organization of applications and components that can also expose web services. And when it exposes web services, you can put another concentric circle around them that allow new capabilities and new functions to actually tap into those legacy applications that you had in place already. Those of you that go out and travel on a regular basis, you probably are interfacing with new applications to determine what tickets are available to you, who's got the best fare, how long am I going to be stuck in the airport between flights, which seat is the best. None of those new applications would have even existed if Sabre and the other legacy travel industries did not take this approach back in the web days. So if you think about Sabre, just as an example, Sabre continues to book all the air tickets that you order on a mainframe. But what's nice about the travel industry, and you'll probably see this in your own industry as well, is that there are a ratio between looks and books, or reads and writes, using engineering terms. Understanding that ratio in the travel industry said that all this looking does not need to happen in the mainframe. We can cache out the information, and we can put API connections and conduits back into this information, and we can push that information to the outer layers. When you start to do that, you can actually strip functions off of the mainframe. So the mainframe no longer had to handle looks, and so we pushed that out. As you push functions out, as you transform individual functions and put them into the further out circles, the legacy actually starts to shrink. And that is where the big cost savings come from. So you want to tap into the cloud not for cost savings, but for transformational purposes. And so to get cloud right, there's a very simple set of things that you need to think about. First and foremost, don't think legacy, think new, think greenfield, think enhancements to what you've already got in place. What new capabilities and functions can I create? And don't create them as more legacy code. Create them as these outer layers, these outer concentric circles. then you're not going to move. You're going to transform. Hybrid cloud is all about taking things that run in these outer cloud areas, these new environments, and connecting them back to the tradition. Don't think hybrid cloud means public and private cloud. It doesn't. It means cloud and whatever. Third, if you don't want to run the legacy anymore, putting it onto infrastructure service or putting it on platform or service isn't going to work very well. Outsource it. Get somebody else to run it for you who perhaps can bring some economies of scale and be more efficient about that. Or transform by getting rid of it and replacing it with a SaaS offering. And then finally, if you can't achieve cloud economics, you shouldn't be in the cloud. I think you heard that from Newstar, and you're going to continue to hear it from the rest of our speakers today. So with that, thanks so much for your time, and good luck with the next few presentations.
Did you want to field questions?
It's up to you.
All right, you got time for one if you want.
Okay. I can't see any of you guys, so if you have a question, just shout it out. All I see is lights.
Just gonna have to yell.
You must have questions. Anyone from SAP here wants to take issue with me? I'm fine with that.
What do you see the spending in large IT organizations shifting between on-premise applications versus SaaS applications?
So this is a really good question. He asked about what is the spending shift going to look like between investment in existing applications and investment in the cloud. A lot of people like to paint black and white pictures here, where it's like, well, they'll spend here, but then in the next 5 years, it's all going to shift over there. It's not. The way you actually have to think about this is, if you look at all the deployment options that you have available to you as in IT, we're just adding more. We're not taking any of the old ones away. So when we add on cloud and we add on SaaS and other elements like that, those are new options for you to deploy applications and add new capability. What will happen over time is, yes, the investments and the money that you spend on older deployments, what we call traditional implementations, will decline. But they'll decline not because we're going to stop using them, but because we're going to shift more of that function as we transform organizations and transform business flows into the other side. So a good way to look about this is the big data topic. So big data, everybody says, is just all this stuff that happens in the cloud. No. You got a ton of that big data already sitting in a data warehouse. And while most of what's in your data warehouse might be what happened in the rear view mirror, and all the stuff in real time is what's happening in the forward mirror, what's happening right now, there's really not a lot of insight you can get from what happened right now if you don't know what happened in the past as well. And you'll have to connect the two to really see if a trend is happening. We talk about in market research that 2 points don't make a trend. You have to have a minimum of 3 to see the pattern. And 3 is at least going to be 2 in your data warehouse and 1 up there. So we're going to continue to invest in things we have on premise, and that's going to continue to be the bulk of what we invest in because we know how to. We still have to learn how to use this new stuff, and so the investments will happen here, and they'll happen at great growth rates. But overall dollars, it's going to be a while before those really start to take off. And if you want to see what the specific numbers are that we put in place, you can certainly look at the Forrester forecast for that.
All right, thanks a lot, James.
You bet.
And you're here for the rest of the conference?
Today.
Yeah,
Yep.
so if you have questions, hunt James down in one of his panels or discussions or in a hallway somewhere.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.